These past few weeks, we have started to get a dribble of Halo Infinite news, which admittedly is better than the no content that we were getting before. However, as you all know, not all of this news has been positive, and much of it could be described as negative, for example the armor coatings or even the news of Chris Lee leaving. There is still tons of information that we're waiting to see though, and in the time that we wait, I thought it might be kind of interesting to go over all the different possible outcomes of Halo Infinite once it does actually release. The way I see it, there are basically three different ways that Halo Infinite's launch and the longevity of the game could go, and obviously there's a ton of room in between them. The game won't necessarily fall into one of these specifically, there's a lot of bleed over. But we're going to go over each of the most likely scenarios, and I'll even put my money where my mouth is, and even attempt to predict how Halo Infinite does, so that you can all come make fun of me in a year or two from now when I get it totally wrong. Before we hop into the different outcomes, I'm going to say something though that I think is going to instantly upset some people, and that is that the long-term success of Halo Infinite relies much more heavily on the multiplayer being good than the campaign being good. Barring some super innovative changes to the campaign that allow for way more replayability, the majority of players, even if the campaign is amazing, will play the campaign and move on to other games, maybe occasionally returning throughout the years. Yes, I know that some people turn to speedrunning or 100%ing the game or lasso runs, etc, to get more mileage out of the campaign, but the truth of it is that if you want people to return to your game day after day for years on end, the multiplayer is going to be what has to do that. Obviously with that big caveat being something innovative on the campaign front. The move to pseudo open world could offer much more replayability than the more linear nature of prior Halo games. I do want to make it clear though, I'm not disparaging people at all who prefer the campaign. I totally understand that. All I'm saying is that long-term player numbers, stream numbers, etc. rely much more heavily on multiplayer than they do the campaign. Games like Titanfall 2 or the recent Doom games are a great example of this, because while they have multiplayers that some people love, especially in the case of Titanfall, the player numbers just aren't there years down the line or even a year down the line like you might want them to be. Now there's nothing wrong with this, and games can easily be a huge success without multiplayer. I mean, look at all the CD Projekt Red games or the Sony games. But for a game like Halo that has been the top dog period and wants to reclaim the throne of the top multiplayer game and just the top game in general, it needs the multiplayer to be good, and if the campaign is also good, then it's just icing on the cake. Especially if Halo Infinite is supposed to be this 10-year project. Halo Infinite is not going to last for 10 years just on campaign updates. It's going to need a good multiplayer, because even with campaign updates, players will come back to play the new update, but unless there's something that's really replayable, like I said, they're not going to come back day in and day out. They're just going to come when the updates hit. So with that out of the way, let's kind of jump into the possible outcomes. The first outcome is that the game is bad. Now obviously there's a lot of flexibility in what makes the game bad, but this could be a variety of things, from the game releasing missing a bunch of content, kind of like Halo 5 did, or even just the core gameplay being unfun to a majority of players or just really uninspired. So the game comes out and it's bad, so what happens from there? Well, the multiplayer of the game is going to be free to play, so I think regardless of how Halo Infinite is as a game, bad, mediocre, good, it is going to have a big player base on day one, and that's because it's a free to play game with the name Halo. There's going to be a ton of people that check it out just because it's the new Halo game, and there's going to be a lot of marketing dollars behind it. I'm sure Microsoft is going to pay all your favorite streamers to stream the game, and that's just going to get a lot of their fan base in to play the game, and all of this together is going to lead to a very big player count on day one or the first week, however you want to measure that. I would honestly say that Halo Infinite, the first day or the first week, will be the highest player count that Halo has ever had. Like I said, the game is going to free to play, and that plays a huge part in this, and just the fact that gaming has expanded since some of the older Halo games were really popular. So I do really think that Infinite will break player numbers. The only way it won't is if reviews come out before, or there's a beta that comes out before and it's just absolutely atrocious. Then maybe people won't check it out on release, but I think that's the only way that the game doesn't break player base number records on day one or week one, however you want to measure that, like I said. So from here though is where the game being bad will obviously play a role. Since the game is going to be free to play, the drop off will be even more insane than something like Halo 5 or Halo 4, where people invested $60 into it and want to get their money out of it. If someone launches up Halo Infinite and it's a bad game, it's missing a bunch of content, or the gameplay is uninspired like I said, they won't even stick around for a full week. Look at something like Hyperscape. The game actually isn't that bad, and it's even a game backed by Ubisoft, but it's pretty much already dead at this point because there just isn't a market for another Battle Royale game. Halo Infinite could easily face the same fate if the multiplayer doesn't do something to keep people around. Now, if all these people end up leaving, I think there's two cases that we could see. And the first one is probably more likely, but it depends on exactly how many people leave pretty quickly. I think there's a good chance that if Halo Infinite totally flops and people end up not liking the multiplayer at all and nobody is playing it a year or so down the line, I think there's a good chance that Microsoft cuts out 343 and either kind of shelves support for Halo Infinite or maybe brings in another studio to try and resurrect the game. Alternatively, also, if there's enough signs of life, maybe 343 is given a chance to try and resurrect the game, but I just don't know because 343's track record has not been great. So you would have to think they're kind of on thin ice at this point. The next possible outcome is that the game is mediocre. Again, this could mean a wide variety of things, whether again it's just the gameplay isn't as good or it's just that Halo doesn't have the pull that it used to. Now I think that this is the most likely scenario. I think Halo Infinite will be pretty competent, maybe the campaign's good, and maybe the multiplayer is pretty decent, but I just don't see it overcoming any of the huge games that are out today like Call of Duty, Fortnite, even something like Valorant or Apex. I just don't see it really taking over any of those unless they do something super innovative. As much as I say a Battle Royale would be cool in Halo, I don't even know if that'll necessarily do it because the Battle Royale genre is pretty oversaturated at this point anyways. So the game ends up being mediocre, and what exactly does that mean? I think we could live a life similar to Halo 5, where sure, the game has plenty of people playing to play it years down the line, and there's plenty of streamers who stream the game, and there's plenty of YouTubers who make videos on it, but it's never making a dent on the top gaming landscape. Even during Halo 5's quote-unquote prime in the first year or two, you would just scroll pretty far down the Twitch page to even find the Halo 5 category unless a big tournament was going on. Sadly, I just think this is probably where Halo Infinite ends up because even though I love Halo and I want it to succeed, I just really don't know if 343 will be able to come in and totally hit it out of the park and totally resurrect the franchise. I think if we do end up with this scenario and the game is pretty mediocre, but it retains enough players to justify keeping 343 and keeping them updating the game, I do think that Halo Infinite can live out that 10-year lifespan, and it'll kind of just live in the world of a more niche title. The players will probably spike a bit every time there's a big update, and then it'll obviously kind of level out over time and then spike again. But regardless, I don't think we'll ever hit those huge numbers that you see from the big games now. This would leave huge questions on what happens after Halo Infinite though, in terms of the Halo franchise as a whole. Does this mean 343 is going to develop another game, or is another studio going to come in and make Halo games? I think there will be a huge opening, regardless actually of how Halo Infinite does, for a second studio to come in and develop spin-off style games or even games on the off cycle just to kind of keep Halo more in the forefront. So the last outcome, obviously, is that the game is good. Now, sadly, this is probably the outcome that I think is the least likely to happen. And by good, I mean an absolutely amazing game, similar to the reviews you would see from a Halo 3 back in the day. The campaign is amazing and it has people really playing it, and there's actually a reason to play it more than once. And the multiplayer is something that people really want to sink countless of hours into. As much as I'd want to see this happen, I'm just not really sure that 343 or even Halo as a whole can do this in this day and age. I do think that their best bet, like I was mentioning earlier, might be something similar to a Battle Royale, even though it is oversaturated, or some other totally new innovative game mode that really spices up the multiplayer landscape of Halo and gives people more to play than just the standard arena style gameplay that Halo has. For the most part, every big Halo title in recent years has had an innovative game mode, and I'm sure Infinite will have one, whether it's a Battle Royale or something totally new, and I actually think a lot of Halo Infinite's success rides on this game mode. I think the arena style gameplay is what it is, and it is the core experience of Halo, but I think Halo needs something that appeals a bit more to the masses to kind of attract them into Halo, and then from there it can convert them into the core gameplay style. For a lot of people, Halo's gameplay style just is very off-putting, as it's not like anything else, and I don't want Halo to change its roots and try and appeal to all those people. I just think that it needs to do something to kind of attract them in and get them used to it, and then it can convert them to playing core multiplayer, core 4v4 arena modes, and the like. I do want to say that even if the game is good, I am still pretty skeptical that it really becomes a top game, but I do think there is a world where Halo Infinite is very solid and maybe ends up similar to something like Rainbow Six Siege, where the game player base is very healthy, the scene is very healthy, but it's not necessarily one of the top games. I think if you asked anyone in the Halo community, they would be pretty happy with a player base and scene of that size. Obviously, there's huge parallels to Siege there, because Siege has been a game that has been supported over many years, just like Halo Infinite is supposed to be. So yeah, that's kind of the video. I want to hear what you guys think the outcome of Halo Infinite will be, so let me know in the comments. Obviously, this is all just speculation. We really don't have any information to go off of other than the little bits and pieces and kind of 343's track record in the past. Just as a quick recap, I think it's most likely that the game is mediocre or average, but still continues to get support and has a healthy enough player base that we can still play the game, similar to something like Halo 5. On the less likely front, I think that we get a game that totally flops and just completely kills the franchise for now, or a game that's really good and totally resurrects the franchise. I think those are much less likely than getting a game that's a lot more average, just because there's so many things that would have to go right for Halo Infinite to totally resurrect Halo, and there's so many things that would have to go wrong for it to be a totally terrible game. Although some of the things that we've heard in terms of Halo Infinite's development could lead me to believe that the game being a total flop is a little bit more likely than it being a total success. And that's just due to all the reports that we've heard about how tumultuous Halo Infinite's development has been. They're having a lot of issues, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the game is going to be bad. We've seen games that have had really hectic game development cycles end up being good, but we've probably honestly seen a lot more that ended up being pretty bad. As always, if you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. If you want to chat with me live or just ask me any questions, you can catch me over on Twitch, and if that isn't enough me for you, you can also follow me on Twitter. With that said, I'll see you all next time.